This is an introduction of our subject on management accounting. Okay, so we normally start with the definition, okay, of management accounting. And when you try to read the definition, take note, okay, it says that it refers to the function of providing professional advisory service. Okay, now when we say professional, normally we are referring to entities, okay, or individuals with the proper educational background and experience. Okay, so they have the specialties to provide these services in this type of field. And also, and in the definition, you will see that ayan, it states that the primary purpose of which is to improve the client's use of its capabilities and resources to achieve the objectives of the organization. This is the purpose of MAS. Now take note, it says that it is to improve the client's use of its capabilities and resources. Now, if you're going to improve the capabilities and resources of the client, well, actually that part is not actually our responsibility. That's the responsibility of the client. But to improve the use, to improve the use, okay, to help the client improve the use of its existing capabilities and resources, that's the primary purpose of MAS. Okay, now when we say resources, most of the time we are talking about the 4 M's. Okay, now do you still remember your 4 M's? You have your machineries. Okay, what are machineries? Okay, when we talk about machineries, we are pertaining to the tangible, okay, normally the tangible assets, okay, yan na ginagamit, okay, in the production process or in the business process. And then we also have the manpower. Okay, so the manpower, now when we say manpower, we are pertaining to, ayan, self-explanatory, the individuals, okay, that make up the organization. Also, in your 4 M's, you also have your methods. Ayan. When we say methods, okay, this represents your intangibles naman. For machineries, you have the tangibles. Methods, these are your intangibles. Okay, now when we say intangibles, here we're not just talking about the intangible assets. It also includes the methods and the policies that are used in the business process. And then finally, you have your, in your 4 M's, you have your materials, okay, or mats. Ayan, your materials, okay. These are the necessary input so that, okay, you can start your business process, okay. And syempre, you cannot come up with an output if you do not have an input. Okay, now when we say materials, we're not just talking about your raw materials, no. Sometimes if you are a servicing company, okay, your inputs may be in the form of manpower. Okay, anyway, as we go along, we're going to discuss this. Okay, not because it is an individual, it's already considered as manpower. Sometimes some of your materials may be classified under methods. Okay, so it really depends. Anyway, that will be for other lessons. Now, in some books, they have 5 M's. Why do they have 5 M's? Because included in their 5 M's is your money. Now, when we talk about money, well, yes, it's still part of our resources, but if money is used, it will become one of your 4 M's. Okay, so we just stick to your 4 M's. Now, when we talk about the objectives of an organization, normally, if you ask someone or your classmates, siguro, or most of instructors in business, when we talk about objectives of business, most of the time, they will tell you, well, the basic objective is to maximize the profit. But if you go to financial management, this is not a good objective for a business. Why? There are a lot of reasons why. Okay, number one, it does not consider the risk. Okay, of your cash flows. And number 2, it does not consider the timing of our cash flows. Okay, so ayun. So a better objective, sabi ni Gitman, aside from maximizing profits, a better objective will be to maximize your shareholders wealth. Okay, let me write that down. Kunyari maganda yung sulat ko, shareholders wealth. Ayan, now when we talk about shareholders wealth, okay, most of the time, okay, we use the market value or the quoted value of our stocks as an indicator of your shareholders wealth. Ayan, mali pa yung spelling niya. Okay, now in some books, sabi nila, well, this one is a good or a better objective, no, as compared to maximization of profits. But these two, okay, maximization of profits and maximization of shareholders wealth, okay, still focuses on monetary items. No? It's measured in terms of money. A better objective will be to consider, okay, not just the monetary items, but also the non-monetary items that make up the organization. That's why in some books you have the maximization of strategic value. Let me write that down. Strategic value. Okay, this is the value of the firm after considering the monetary and non-monetary items. Anyway, we have a separate subject for that. Okay, now when we talk about organization, okay, there are different kinds of organization, no? You have the organizations as to, let's say, as to operation. What are the different organizations as to operations? And this one is very easy. You have your servicing, okay, you have your merchandising, okay, and then you have your, after merchandising, you have your manufacturing. Okay, now as to ownership, and as to ownership, you have the sole proprietorship or sole proprietor, you have partnership, okay, composed of the partners, and then you have your corporations. In MAS, most of the time, okay, we are talking about corporations and manufacturing companies. We're not saying that MAS is not applicable to servicing and merchandising or to sole proprietors and to partnerships, no? It's just that most of the time, okay, those who avail of this type of service or services are the corporations and the manufacturing entities. Okay, so that's the definition of MAS. Okay, now what are the basic characteristics of MAS? Number 1, the service is for management. Okay, this means that, well, it really depends on how you interpret it, no? Now, when we say service is for the management, it could be interpreted as the service is to improve your basic management functions. Okay, so it involves planning, leading. You remember your PLOCD MDM? Planning, leading, organizing, controlling, directing, and motivating functions. And then, of course, decision making. Ayan. In some books, when we say service is for the management, they interpret this as, well, the beneficiary should be the management and not third persons or not the practitioner. Pero for me, okay, I want to interpret this as, well, it's to improve the basic management functions. Okay, so these are your management ayan, functions. Nagloloko siya. Ba't kaya ito nagloloko? Ayun. And then it's related to the future. Okay? Bakit ganun? This subject, okay, focuses on decision making. Now, we don't decide, no? We don't make decisions based on, we don't make decisions for past events. Do you make decisions for past events? Maybe you can make a decision based on, Okay, past events. But for past events, you don't, no? Like for example, what are you going to eat yesterday? What are you going to wear last week? Okay, so we don't make decisions for the past. We make decisions for the future. And it involves problem solving. Okay, so that's your MAS. There's always a problem. Okay, and then you look for the solution. Okay, once the solution has been found, okay, you make a recommendation to the management. So basically that's the basic function of MAS. Now, it's non-recurring. Okay, now don't get me wrong. Problems will be recurring, but the engagement, okay, should be non-recurring, because once you have found the solution for a particular problem, okay, you don't have to come up with another engagement to look for the solution of the same problem. Okay, pag naulit siya. And then it's broad in scope. Now, when we say broad in scope, okay, it's not confined, no, with, let's say, just accounting. Because you see, accounting, no, dekahon lang yan. It's highly structured. There are a lot of standards, no, that makes up our field. Ayan. Highly structured, a lot of rules, general rules, and exemption to the general rules. Okay, so dekahon siya. Now, don't get me wrong. Pag sinabi kong dekahon ang accounting, especially financial accounting, I'm not saying that it's easy. I'm just saying that it's highly structured. And then, a part of that box is a whole. Okay, this whole is now your MAS. That's now MAS or MS. You have your financial management, okay, whose task is to, relate accounting with other fields, like for example, finance, economics, okay, psychology, industrial engineering, okay, and so on, and so forth. Okay, so ayun, that's the job of MAS. That's why in our future discussion, you'll expect me to, let's say, relate our subject with some concepts in economics or in marketing or in psychology. Yan. Yun po yung ibig sabihin ng it's broad and scope. And because it's broad and scope, okay, there will be varied assignments. Okay, you will not just be confined to auditing or preparation of financial statements, making journal entries, okay, and the likes. Okay, and because of that, okay, it requires greater job specifications. Okay, and one of my favorite, okay, is number 8. One of the specifications is that, okay, you should have a good human, and this skill is very important when it comes to MAS, because you're going to work as a consultant. Okay, you will be working with different kinds of people, and in your work, okay, one of the most important aspects of that is the gathering of data. Okay, that's why you have to be good, to other people, okay, so that they will tell you the truth. Ganon. You don't have to intimidate them, okay, just like auditors. Now, again, I have nothing against auditors, okay, it's just that the personality of auditors and those who are in this field, MS, have, I think, opposing personalities. Based on my experience, mas friendly yung approach ng mga nasa MS practice as compared sa mga nasa audit. Medyo natatakot ako kapag nandyan yung auditor. Pero kapag nandyan yung mga consultants dati, medyo chillax lang. Okay, so, ayun. Anyway, we'll go back to this soon. Marami pa sana akong example pag nasa classroom tayo, pero sige na nga, dahil nagtitipid tayo ng oras, I don't want to waste your time. Ayan. Now, what are the basic differences of managerial accounting and financial accounting? Okay, as to users, for financial accounting, you have external users, which means these are not directly related to to the business. Okay, these are external entities. Like for example, you have your BIR Siguro or you have your SEC. Okay, so those are your external users. Okay, you can also have your potential investors as external users. Pero existing investors, you have the owners, ganon, or the management, those are considered as internal users. Okay. Now, in financial accounting, you will expect that you will be preparing general or generic, kumbaga, na reports. Na when we say generic, let me write that down. Paano ba? Generic. Now, when we say generic reports, they are prepared using certain standards. Ito na yung gap natin. Oops, I'm sorry. Balik tayo. Ayan. Ito na yung gap natin. That's the meaning of generic reports. Now, when we say special reports, okay, there are standards naman that we have to follow, but we are flexible when it comes to these standards. So, they are tailored. These are tailored reports. Okay, now when we say tailored, ayan, tama ba? Tailored. When we say tailored, they are prepared according to the needs of the users. Ayun, so you don't have to follow certain standards. Now, talking about standards, okay, let's jump to letter T. As to reporting standards, in some books, well, everybody knows what's GAAP, diba? Your generally accepted accounting principles. Now, in some books, okay, they will say managerial accounting has no standards. Meron naman, there are still standards. It's just that we are flexible when it comes to the application of these standards, no? One of my favorite example here when it comes to flexibility of standards is your marketing expense, okay? Or better yet, your advertising na lang. And advertising. Now, when we talk about advertising expense yan when it comes to financial accounting. But in managerial accounting, well, it really depends, okay? Sometimes, okay, this can be viewed as, well, we're going to spend so that in the future we will have a return from our operations. But in substance, this can be treated as an investment. Diba? If that's how you view it. And if that is treated as an investment, okay, so if it's a big cash outflow, okay, then it can be subjected to siguro capital budgeting. Okay, will you be tied up to a 2-year or 3-year contract with the following periodic payments with the expectations that the returns coming from your revenues will be this much? Ayan, di nag-capital budgeting ka na. Okay, so ayun. Some companies, when we talk about research and development, okay, last time I checked, research and development should be expensed, okay, when they are incurred, unless the research and development, okay, pertains to, let's say, development of patent yata yun. So if it's used in the development of patent, then it should be included in the cost of the patent. So that's your gap. But then in other companies, hindi. Okay, research and development is the major component, okay, of our operations. That's why we have premium products. Therefore, okay, we are going to treat this as part of our product cost. Diba? But that's only for managerial accounting, ha? Okay, if your main intention is to, to help you in coming up with a decision. Anyway, so, ayun, we are flexible in the following of standards. For financial accounting, there should be strict compliance with the GAAP. As to time frame, this is already discussed earlier, okay? In financial accounting, it's historical in nature. Why? Because we don't make journal entries or we don't report in our financial statements the effect of future transactions. I think there's only one, na maalala ko na pwede mo nang i-record in your books even if it is a future event. Okay, if I remember it right, I think it's the contingent loss. If a contingent, a contingent loss is a loss that is dependent, okay, upon the happening of a future event. Ayan. So, therefore, a contingent loss is a future event because it's based on a future event. Now, if it states that if the loss can be estimated and it's highly probable, parang ganon, then you can already include that in your financial statements. So far, I think that's the only item, that's the only future event that you can put in your financial statements. But most of the time, we only record historical events. Okay, so ayun, dapat nangyari muna. While for managerial accounting, since our focus is on decision making, ayan, geared tayo towards future information. Kaya meron tayong forecasting, budgeting, and performance evaluation, and the like. Okay? Ayun, analysis of data, financial accounting is objective. Why? Because it's highly structured nga. It's either tama or mali lang. It's either black or white. But for managerial accounting, it's objective and subjective at the same time. We also consider other factors that, well, most of the time cannot be measured in terms of money. So it's not just black and white. Okay, you have black and white and more than 50 shades of grays yan in between. Okay po? So, ayun. Now, as of this point, okay, what I want you to take note of is this one. Of course, everything is important, no? But if you want to understand the real difference of managerial and financial accounting, okay, it has something to do with the time frame of information. Okay. Ayan. And of course, this one is also very important when it comes to decision making. Okay. Sometimes we focus most of our efforts measuring, okay, measuring the values of our decision, pero in actual practice, what cannot be measured in terms of money sometimes is more important. Okay, so ayun. Now, let's continue. Work of management and the planning and control cycle. Ito, madali lang. Okay, everybody knows what is planning. Okay, this is when you try to organize your resources. Okay, set your standards. Ayan, before beginning the business process. Okay, now, once you have begun your business process, okay, you now have directing and motivating. Okay, this is when you manage your resources and make sure that your goals are properly achieved. Okay, in other books, okay, this is what they call the operating, how do I spell that? Bobo talaga ako sa spelling operating function. Okay, and then you have your controlling function. What happens in controlling function? Okay, this is when you try to compare your plans and the actual results of your operations. So here you try to identify your variances. Okay, the difference. Were you able to meet your objectives? Have you surpassed your objectives, or baka bitin pa? Okay, and then you have your decision making. Now, in some books, no, in most books in management, okay, the chapters are arranged this way. Ayan, chapter 1 introduction, chapter 2, ayan, you have the basic management functions, planning, leading, chapter 3, organizing, controlling, and so on and so forth. Chapter 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on and so forth. Ganun. And then you have your decision making, and sometimes it gives us the idea that decision making is the final function. Okay? Because, well, you cannot lead your resources or direct them if you were not able to plan. So, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Ganun. And then, last chapter, decision making. And it doesn't mean that decision making is the last step. Actually, decision making is the only function that is integrated with the other functions, which means, okay, even if you're still in the planning stage, okay, you can already start making decisions, when you decide what will be your standard. Okay, so ayun. Now, which reminds me, okay, if you've been reading your book, okay, you will encounter the Deming wheel. I'm not really sure how you spell this, okay? Is it with a double M or a single M? Okay. When you're not sure, sobrahan mo na lang. Di bali ng sobra kesa sa kulang. Anyway, so you have your Deming wheel. Okay. Which is developed by Mr. Deming, also known as the continuous process improvement. It's one of the concepts that are used in TQM. It's composed of, and that's your continuous process improvement. Plan. Ayan. You plan what you're going to do, and then you do what you have planned. You check the difference, then plan, do, check, and act. Ayan, act. Ayan, so that's your Deming wheel, the continuous process improvement. Okay, so those are your basic steps if you want to improve your business process according to Mr. Deming. Okay, now let's continue. The need for information. As of now, you should know the difference of information and data. Ayan. I believe in other subjects, this is already discussed, especially in statistics, and of course in financial analytics. When we say information, this is relevant for decision making. If it's not relevant, then maybe it's just a data. This one is a group of records daw. Once the data in some books, it defines information as the data that is processed. So once data is processed, it becomes an information. Now I say it depends. Okay, if that information is used for decision making, it's already useful and relevant, kumbaga, then it is an information. Pero however, no matter how much you process your data, if it cannot be used in decision making, if it's still irrelevant, then it's still considered as data. Okay, so yung characteristics of managerial accounting report. Okay, in financial accounting, this is the priority. But for managerial accounting, since our focus is decision making, well, you want your report to be relevant and timely, available at the time of decision. Now, when we say relevant, okay, it can make a significant difference in our decision if that information or that report is not available. We don't focus too much on accuracy. Okay, actually, we are allowed to come up with estimates lang. Okay, we are allowed to come up with estimates as long as these estimates are reasonable. Okay, now when we say reasonable, they were prepared, using some sort of method. Methodical process. Tama ba yung term ko? Anyway, and then it should be clear, easily understood, okay, and concise. This one, we can just read this, o screen capture nyo na, tapos saka nyo basahin. What are the areas of management, the management function of analysis, planning, organizing, and controlling. So these are the basic management functions. So now, if you think of it, all your management subjects are actually under MAS. So, your minor subjects are actually major subjects. Tama? The introduction of new ideas, concepts, and methods to management. Ayan, like for example, you have your financial analytics subject, or let's say, ayan, new ideas. Your feasibility study and researches. Ayan, okay, it's part of MAS. Improvement of policies, procedures, systems, and methods. Okay, and organizational relationship. Ang organizational relationship yata is under industrial psychology or human behavior in organization. That's part of HBO. Policies, you have your strategic management, okay, procedures and system. For example, you have your ASAD, your accounting system, analysis and design. Okay, so you have your research subjects and feasibility studies na naman. Those are all part of MS. Application of use of managerial accounting, control systems, data processing, and mathematical techniques and methods. Mathematical techniques. So, ibig sabihin, yung calculus mo, yung statistics natin, o data processing, okay, your CS, I think this is CS2, CS3, or CS4 subjects, and these are all part of MS. You see? It's broad in scope. Number 5, the conduct of special studies, like researches and feasibility studies, development of plans and programs, preparation of recommendations and provision of advice. Okay, so yung mga research subjects muna, those subjects that requires you to come up with a case study and an analysis, and you come up with the recommendations, ayun, those are all part of MAS. Organizational structure, kayang-kaya na ninyo to. When we talk about organizational structure, we're talking about structure, we are talking about, okay, how responsibilities and authority, okay, are put together and organized, okay, inside the organization. So when we talk about organizational structure, most of the time may na-visualize kayo na ganyan, di ba? Ayan, sino to? Sino yung ganon? Tapos, sino yung mga nasa ilalim niya? Okay, and so forth. Most of the time, okay, the organizational structure of a corporation is, highlighted, emphasized. There's another term for that. Okay, most of the time, we'll be talking about the structure of a corporation. Ganun na lang pala dapat. Okay, so, dapat kabisado ninyo to. Okay, so let's just try to review. Your corporation can be classified into two muna. You have your profit-oriented and you have your not-for-profit. Not-for-profit. Now, when we say profit-oriented, alam na ninyo yun, kumikita. Pag not-for-profit, kumikita rin. Pero, ayan, the profit is supposed to be returned, or it should not be distributed to the owners. Okay, so anyway, bakit ko na banggit ito? The structure actually depends, no? Okay, whether it's a profit or not for profit. Starting with the owners, for example, here for a profit-oriented organization, you have your shareholders. How do I write this? You have your shareholders, and here you have your members, diba? Ayan, and then your shareholders or your members will choose a group of people that will represent them in the day-to-day decision. Here you have your board ayan, board of directors. Here you have your board of trustees. Ayan, pero ngayon, okay, sabi, you can use board of directors as long as it is stated in the bylaws yata, parang ganon. Anyway, okay, your board of directors or board of trustees, they are going to sometimes assign, appoint, or maybe hire someone from the outside who is going to act as a president. Ayan, president, also known as your CEO, chief. Ayan, chief executive officer. Okay, so tama ba? Ayan. And then your presidents will have their vice presidents. It really depends, no? Sometimes some organizations will have 2 or 3, sometimes they have 5. Pag minsan malabo, okay, kasi may presidente na parang vice president naman, or vice presidente na parang presidente. You know what I mean. Okay, under this vice president is another vice president. So, bahala na sila doon. Pero ang focus natin, okay, you have your vice president for finance. Okay, your vice president for finance is also known as your chief financial, and your chief financial officer. Okay, so your VP finance is also known as your chief financial officer. And then your vice president for finance, okay, will have 2 sidekicks, no? Okay, ano ba? You have your, ba't ba galing sa baba? Dapat galing sa taas pa, ganun dapat. Anyway, ayoko nang mag-edit pa. Ayan, kayo na lang bahalang mag-adjust. You have here your treasurer. Tadaan! Treasurer. And you have your accountant or accounting manager. Manager. How do I spell? Hindi siya kasya. How do I undo this? It does not undo. Okay. Meron tayong burahin natin kasi dugyot na siya masyado. Eraser. Okay. Ito pa pala. Ayan, napapahiya na ako. Ang haba na masyado ng patalastas. Okay. G. Okay, so you have your accounting manager, and same with profit-oriented companies. They have the treasurer, okay, and you have the accounting manager. Ito na. Okay, why am I doing this? I want to emphasize one thing. The accounting manager for a profit-oriented organization is known as your controller. Is it with a double L? I'm not really sure. But the accounting manager for a not-for-profit organization is known as the comptroller. Ayun lang naman. I remember when I was in the undergrad, I asked one of my teachers, ma'am, what's the difference of controller and comptroller? Okay, so ang sinagot sa akin, the other one is Old English and the other one is British English. Hindi po ganun. Comptroller is the accounting manager for a not-for-profit organization, while the controller is the accounting manager for a profit-oriented organization. Okay, so ayan, dapat pala dito ako nag-drawing. Okay, anyway, and as a continuation, you should know the difference of centralization versus decentralization. When we say centralization, centralized, from the word centralized, isa lang ang nagdi-decide, di ba? If it's decentralized, marami ang nagdi-decide. Now, basically, there are 2 features of a decentralized entity. Now, when we say decentralized, number 1, sabi niya, it is divided into smaller, more manageable segments. Okay, now when we say segments, the organization could be segmented according to products, as to, let's say, function, or segmented as to operation. Operation in terms of, let's say, geographical operation or product operation, ganun. And number 2, segments should have their own managers. Ayan. They should have their own managers. Because, okay, what's the use of dividing the organization into smaller more manageable segments, okay, if there's only one or two people making the decision. So, decentralized pa rin yun. Or for example, okay, you have a lot of managers naman, pero what do they manage? What are they managing? If the organization is not divided into smaller, more manageable segments. So these two, no? So these two items should be present. Now when we talk about decentralization versus centralization, this is not something parang black or white. Hindi po ganun, okay? That if you are centralized, then you are not decentralized. This is more of a continuum. There is a degree. That's the meaning of continuum. There is a degree between being centralized and decentralized. And there is no such thing as absolute decentralization. Okay, so that's it. Organizational charts, you already know this. Every Sunday, you go to charts. Line and staff relationship. Now, when we say line function, okay, your function is directly related to the operations of a business. While staff function, okay, your function is not directly related to the operations of a business. Let's have an example, okay? For example, you have University of the Cordilleras, okay? And eto ako. Oh, ayan. Ayan. And I'm a faculty member. Ano ako? Line or staff? Now, UC is an educational institution. Okay? You're supposed to provide quality education to your clients. And you do that by hiring a faculty member and providing these services to your clients. Okay? So, do I have a line function or staff function? Siyempre, line function yan. Oh, ayun. Now, for example, you have here the HR. No, yung HR director. Ayan. HR director. Line or staff? Can UC provide education without an HR director? The answer is yes. Therefore, HR director is classified as a person having a staff function. Support sila sa line function. Now, I'm not saying na mas mataas yung position ng faculty member kaysa sa HR director. I'm just saying that this is how we classify their functions. Okay? Now, dati kasi when we say staff, okay, we imagine the organizational chart, no? Okay, and kung sino yung pinaka nasa ilalim, okay, sila yung staff. Hindi po ganun, okay? One can have a staff function, okay, and they are located at this level, and one can have a line function, ayan, and they are located at this level. The Chief Financial Officer, alam na ninyo to. Well, who is the Chief Financial Officer? This is the Vice President for Finance. Tada! Okay. The controller is the manager in charge of the accounting department and she reports to the Chief Financial Officer. Ayun. So, siya nga yung Vice President for Finance. Tada! Treasurership versus Controllership function. Basahin nyo na lang ito. To summarize, okay, the Controllership functions, and so you have 1 to 7. They are more on historical reporting. And once they have the reports, these reports will be submitted to the treasurer, and the treasurer will make a decision. So the focus is more on decision making. Now, based on the decisions, an action will be taken, and these actions will be summarized, recorded, and reported by the controller. Oh, ayan. And since they are using the same set of information, okay, we normally see no controllers performing functions of a treasurer, like for example, okay, making analysis for short-term financing or preparing budgets, kunyari, and vice versa. Sometimes you see treasurers preparing performing functions of controllers. Ayan, like for example, coming up with a summary of, let's say, assets, ayan, for the financial statements, and so on and so forth. Okay po. So, wait lang. What's this? Bakit ayaw na?